Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about the anatomy of the female reproductive system. Females have different tracts for the urinary and the reproductive system. Females have an opening, the urethral orifice for urine to come out, so it's connected to the urethra and the urinary bladder. Then there is the vaginal orifice for either the menstrual fluid to flow out during the menstrual cycle, or it's going to be the opening for accepting the copulatory organ of the male penis during the sexual intercourse. And then posterior, there is the anus for feces to come out. Females have external genitalia parts and internal genitalia parts. The external ones are more to protect the internal organs. So there is the mons pubis, which is that fatty region right here. When a female hits puberty, that's where the pubic hair is going to be located. There are those two parts right here, those skin folds, labium minora and labium majora, or we can refer to them as labium majus and labium minus. And again, they are to protect the internal reproductive parts of the female. Here is the pubic symphysis, which is going to connect the two pelvic bones together. Right here, there is the clitoris, and the clitoris is actually made up of rectal tissue. So it's homologous actually to the penis of the males because it's going to be able to get swollen with blood and erect during tactile stimulation because it has sensory nerves that are sensitive to touch. Right here, close to the vaginal opening, there is this gland right here, the greater vestibular gland, which we'll go ahead and zoom in on it. The vagina is right here. And at the end, this is the uterus. At the end of the uterus, this part right here is the cervix. And then connected to the uterus, we have the fallopian tube, which is connected to the ovary where the eggs are going to be made. So if we look at this image right here, we can see the mons pubis right there. Right here would be the labium majora, and those would be the labium minora. You can see right here the glans of the clitoris, glans meaning the head of the clitoris right there. This is going to be the opening for urine to flow out. So this is the urethral orifice right there. This whole entire area is known as the vestibule. This is the opening for the vagina right here. And then here is the anus. Now, at the opening of the vagina, you can see this part right here, but in this image, they have it ruptured, which is the hymen. The hymen is actually part of the vaginal mucosa layer, so part of the vaginal epithelial tissue. It goes ahead and it forms a thin layer right here, the hymen, right on top of the vaginal opening. And the hymen is pretty vascular, so it has lots of blood vessels. So those blood vessels could rupture. And the female would bleed if the hymen gets stretched or ruptured. Things that can stretch it or rupture it are either sports or inserting like tampons or having sexual intercourse. And sometimes actually the hymen in females, it's really tough that it has to be breached surgically if intercourse is to take place. Now, the vaginal orifice right here, flanking the vaginal orifice, you can see the opening of the ducts of the vestibular glands. So the vestibular glands are actually going to produce mucus, a mucus secretion, and it's going to be released in this region right here in the vestibule region, and that helps keep the vestibule moist and lubricated, facilitating intercourse. As we said, the clitoris of the females, it's homologous to the penis of the males because it has erectile tissue. So the erectile tissue that it contains is the corpora cavernosa, which is the same erectile tissue found in the penis. So the corpora cavernosa is that erectile tissue, and so the clitoris is going to be able to get engorged with blood and erect during intercourse. Right here are the greater vestibular glands, the ones that are going to release mucus in this region right here to help with the lubrication. The bulbs of the vestibule, those actually get engorged with blood during intercourse, and when they get engorged with blood, what they do is they go ahead and they squeeze the urethral orifice closed, preventing any semen or bacteria from actually entering into the urinary bladder during intercourse. The ovaries are the site for the production of both the eggs and the production of the sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. By birth, a female is actually presumed to have her lifetime supply of the eggs, and it's about 300,000 oocytes, or basically eggs. Now, when a female hits puberty, each month an egg or an oocyte is going to be ejected out, and it actually leaves a scar behind on the ovary surface. Now, when it gets ovulated, or basically ejected out of the ovary, those fimbriae right there, they actually help kind of sweep the egg and carry it into the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube, or you can call it the uterine tube, is made out of smooth muscles, so that those smooth muscles would help propel the egg down into the uterus. Now, if when the egg is released into the fallopian tube, if there is a sperm right there, then fertilization might occur. So the fallopian tube is the site for fertilization. And then the fertilized egg eventually is going to have to move down into the uterus. Now, ectopic pregnancy is where a fertilized egg stays within the fallopian tube and tries to develop right there within the fallopian tube, and that's not going to work. That can actually cause the fallopian tube to burst. Now, the uterus right here, it's a muscular organ, and this is where the fertilized egg is going to reside and get nourished, and eventually the embryo is going to stick right here to the wall of the uterus to complete its development. The walls of the uterus, there are 3 walls for the uterus. The very outer layer right here is the perimetrium, and it's actually the visceral peritoneum layer. And then right here in this middle region, there is the myometrium, which is made out of smooth muscles, and those smooth muscles are going to contract rhythmically during childbirth to help push the baby out. The inner layer of the uterine wall is known as the endometrium. And the endometrium, it's made out of mucosal lining. It's made out of a simple epithelium tissue. It also has a thick lamina propria, which is made out of connective tissue. And this is where the embryo is going to implant itself. So the embryo implants itself within the endometrium and resides there to develop. The endometrium has two layers, so we will zoom in on those layers right now to talk about them. But before we do, let me just kind of also talk about this region right here, and this would be the cervix. And actually, right here at the cervix, there is a mucus being secreted. All the time, and that mucus is pretty thick, preventing any bacteria from actually passing from the vagina into the uterus. And it also, that thick mucus prevents the sperm from actually passing into the uterus, except during the mid-cycle. That's when actually that mucus starts to become less thick, and it can allow the sperm to pass through it. And here is the vagina. We will talk about it, but let's go ahead and zoom in on the endometrium wall of the uterus. So right here, you can see a histology image of the endometrium of the uterine wall. And so, as I said, the endometrium has two layers. It has a layer known as the stratum functionalis and the stratum basalis. The stratum functionalis, actually, this is the layer that sheds during menstruation. So if no pregnancy takes place, then the uterine wall starts to shed. And so it's that part right here that sheds during menstruation. The stratum basalis does not get it doesn't shed. It's actually going to help form a new functionalis layer after menstruation is done. The vagina, it's 3 to 4 inches long. It's found in between the urinary bladder and the rectum. We refer to the vagina as the birth canal, as during childbirth, the baby will come out through the vagina and it will expand to allow that. It also allows the menstrual flow and the tissue to come out during menstruation. So as we said, if pregnancy does not take place, the inner wall of the uterus is going to shed and it's going to pass out through the vagina. The vagina also receives the copulatory organ, the penis, during sexual intercourse. The vagina has multiple layers. The very outside layer of the vagina, it's made out of it's the outer fibroelastic adventitia layer, which is made out of connective tissue, and then the middle portion is going to be made out of smooth muscles, so smooth muscles muscularis, and then the inner wall of the vagina, it's an inner mucosa layer, stratified epithelial tissue, and it has ridges to actually stimulate the penis during intercourse. The pH within the vagina, it's acidic, but actually during adolescence, the pH could be basic, and that could actually predispose sexually active teenagers to get sexually transmitted infections, because the pH of the vagina is not acidic yet, and that acidity helps prevent infections. And then as we said right here, also to prevent any infections from also passing from the vagina into the uterus, there's going to be the mucus of the cervix. And actually the mucus of the cervix, not only does it prevent infection from passing from the vagina into the uterus, but also that mucus produced by the cervix can also lubricate the vagina.